The wind whistles across the gray Baltic waters as Michael Peterson boards another rusted tanker from Russia's rapidly expanding Shadow Fleet. As a veteran Danish maritime pilot, he has seen his fair share of sketchy vessels over the years. But nothing could have prepared him for the ramshackle rust buckets now clogging the northern sea lanes, a ragbag armada of decaying oil tankers that has emerged from the murky depths of Russia's sanction-skirting schemes. Since the civilized world united to punish Putin's violent revanchism in Ukraine, the Kremlin's energy export machine has been forced into an underground existence, shunted off legitimate global markets and financial networks. The result is an opaque flotilla of ghoul ships, creaking their way across the high seas under cover of dubious third-country flags and shadowy front owners. From his unique vantage point at the helm, helping to guide these ragtag tankers through Denmark's treacherous coastal straits, Peterson gets an up-close look at the rusting, groaning hulks keeping Moscow's oil export economy afloat. And what he sees is deeply unsettling decrepit ships with poor maintenance, outdated technology, ill-trained crews, and nonchalant attitudes toward basic maritime safety protocols. Old piles of junk is his pained assessment. But for all their ramshackle appearance, these floating coffins represent a crucial economic lifeline for Putin. With over $35 billion worth of Russian crude slipping through the Danish straits last year alone, bound for sanction-defying markets like China and India, the tarnished tankers form the circulatory system pumping funds into Russia's war machine in Ukraine. An entire shadow logistics network has taken shape to bypass Western countermeasures. This parallel petroleum pipeline poses clear environmental risks that should arouse civic concern across the Baltic region. With overage hulls, careless crews, and zero transparency around insurance or safety audits, the chances of a catastrophic collision or grounding seem unacceptably high. A major spill in these sensitive, shallow waters could wreak havoc on local ecosystems for decades. Yet the 19th century laws governing maritime passage have left coastal nations like Denmark regrettably powerless to intercept or turn back this ominous tide of dubious shipping, at least directly. As unsavory Russian captains blithely brush aside requests for local pilot assistance, the frontline Baltic states fret about the accident timeline counting down. Beyond its immediate ecological menace, this shadowy seaborne workaround exposes the deepening fissures in the global rules-based order. For a rogue petrostate to so easily bypass economic statecraft and financial suasion represents an ominous stress test for the future of sanctions regimes and norms enforcement. Can a 21st century vision of cooperative security survive such brazen circumvention and normalization of sanction-busting gray zones? As global institutions like the UN maritime body grow toothless in checking such behaviors, dark adaptations like the Shadow Fleet mock their very premise. How can any Rule .49 errors uphold when individual nations cast the rules aside on the mere perception of expediency? The precedents animating this off-books shipping subterfuge portend trouble across domains. Ultimately, the issue reflects a broader clash between an old edit of freewheeling nation-state amorality and an emerging ethos of interconnected global obligations and responsibilities. The free-for-all mentality that would belch oil into fragile maritime habitats represents the same impulse behind territorial land grabs, wanton trade hostilities, human rights abuses, and democracy rollbacks. For Baltic communities witnessing these creaking smokestacks pass offshore, ethical indifference and rules avoidance have taken utterly concrete form, lapping against their shores and poisoning their futures. The decay is not just physical but moral, an oil-slicked slide into a might-makes-right world of consequence-free actions. Yet there are also glimmers of civic resistance and jurisdictional creativity beginning to push back against this bleak devolution. Regional coordination efforts like the recent 44-nation call to action against the Shadow Armada represent nascent strategies for quarantining and squeezing these sanctions workarounds through regulatory asphyxiation if not direct interdiction. Responsibility becomes the new sovereignty in a hyperliterate age when nameless economic aggression and legal arbitrage produce butterfly effects across every ecosystem. The Shadow Fleet is a microcosm of larger global struggles to redefine the rules and red lines for an interdependent planet. As the last of the dilapidated tankers finally coughed from sight over the horizon, Peterson could be forgiven a mordant chuckle. Every day, it seems, draws another batch of these nautical Frankensteins disgorging their toxic cargoes of moral compromise and rules defiance into the world's common waters. In their slipstreams, you can almost make out the Cheshire grins of dictators and strongmen clinging to fading visions of unchecked national privilege. Yet this slow-motion ethical spill also carries the promise of finally catalyzing collective willpower for principled cooperation and stout defense of universal human and environmental interests. For watchstanders like Peterson, the Shadow Fleet is a mordant reminder that the open sea must remain open to all, but not to open piracy. From the Danish Straits to the South China Sea, the next century's paramount struggle may be ensuring that interconnected spheres like the maritime remain realms of rules-based rights and obligations, not shadowy races to the ethical bottom. In that sense, every rusting Russian tanker tossed upon the Baltic waves propels us further into an uncharted ethical future. The question is whether we'll find our bearings, or simply drift.